There was a preacher that was preaching, and he had poured his heart into a sermon all during the week. And he gets up there and he starts preaching, and he notices this guy out in the middle just drooping off. And as the guy starts to fall asleep, he begins to preach louder and more passionately. And the guy falls deeper and deeper into sleep, the louder and louder he preaches. And so he's finally just stops, and he looks at the guy sitting beside him and he says, "Would you please just wake that guy up?" And the man looked back at him and said, "You wake him up. You're the one that put him to sleep." This morning we're going to be talking about Jacob, and when we do look at Scripture, it's going to be in the 32nd chapter of Genesis. But the story of Jacob actually begins in the 25th chapter. I'll give you the verses later on when we get to it. But it will be in the 32nd chapter of Genesis. When we talk about Jacob, a lot of times we mention his name and the meaning of his name, where it came from. You see, Jacob, when he was born, and if you're not familiar with it, he was born, his brother Esau was born first. He was born later, and as he came out, he was holding on to his brother's heel. Now, the word Jacob means heel grabber or deceiver. And through the rest of Jacob's life, or through most of Jacob's life, he lived it proving his name true. Proving that he really was a heel grabber. Grabbing at others, trying to trip them up, trying to pull them down, and deceiving them the whole way. He proved his name true. He proved it true by one time Esau was coming out of the woods hunting, and they kind of describe them like this. Esau was the hunter, the worker, the one that would go out into the woods and do things on his own. He was the one that his father loved the most. He was the firstborn. And Jacob was more of a homebody. Jacob, they say, was the type to stay at the tents and hang around with the family. He was the mom's favorite. Well, one day, Esau is coming back from hunting, and he's tired and exhausted and hungry. And Jacob has been there at the tents, playing Susie Homemaker, and has cooked up this nice bowl of soup. Esau comes in, and like I said, tired and hungry, and he just don't think he can make it any further. And he looks at Jacob and he says, "Can you please let me have some of that soup? I'm starving to death here." This is, if you're looking for the translation that this one is in, it's in the New Josh version. So, if you don't have that, see me after church. I'll be sure to sell you one. But he said, "I want some of that soup." And Jacob starts thinking things through and comes up with a great idea. "You know what? I'll give you all the soup you want. I'll give you this bowl of soup right here. I was just about to eat it, but I'll give it to you if you'll sell me your birthright." Now, for us, that doesn't mean a whole lot because we don't really understand birthrights from back then. But as the oldest, he would get, I think it was around 60 or 70% of everything that his family owned once his father passed on. And the younger one, Jacob, would get around 40. So it was a big deal to be the oldest because there was more that came along with it. And so, here Jacob is saying, I'll give you this bowl of soup if you'll give me your birthright. If you'll let me be like I'm the oldest and you take mine, then I'll give you some soup. Well, Esau didn't think it through or thought that his brother was joking or something, but he gave it to him. He said, okay, you'll have anything you want. Just give me some of that soup. I don't know if it was good soup or not. But I don't think if it was the best soup in the world, it would have been worth what he sold it for. A lot of times Esau, in that section of his life, is talked about as us selling ourselves out cheaply for temporary pleasure, for temporary benefit. So Esau sold him his birthright. I'm sure he didn't think anything else about it as time went on. But soon their dad was really sick, lying on his deathbed. And it came time for Esau to go in and to claim his birthright, for his father to bless him and tell him that it was his. And Jacob said to himself, well, I bought this fairly and squarely. Well, I bought it for a bowl of soup, but still, it's mine. But his father wasn't in on the deal. So Jacob said, I have to trick him into giving this to me. Because I've earned it. I tricked my brother out of it. Now I need to trick my father into going along with it. And his mom actually went along with everything and said, I'll tell you what, I'll fix some of the deer that your father loves so much, and you can take that into him like you've made it, like you killed it. And if you'll put some of this animal fur on your skin when you go in, because Esau apparently was a very hairy person. I think about it and how he was so hairy that to trick his father, his brother had to put animal fur on himself. Could you imagine the look of that comb or brush each day? That would be awful. It's a good thing they didn't have indoor plumbing back then, or their drains would always be clogged. But here Esau is wanting his birthright, and Jacob is running ahead of him, strapping animal fur to himself, running in with a bowl full of deer that his father loves so much, and his dad had bad eyesight. So he couldn't hardly tell. It would probably be like me taking my glasses off. And so here he comes and he's like, I'm here. And his father knew something was wrong. I'm sure his hearing was going too, but he knew something was up, so he wanted to touch his arm and feel of him to make sure it was him and not his slicker son. And so he felt of him. He ate some of the deer. And before it was all said and done, he fell for it all and gave the birthright to Jacob. Could you believe it? A little deer meat and animal fur, and you've got 60% of the inheritance instead of the 40 or 30% that you were going to get to begin with. It's a pretty good deal. It wasn't long before Esau found out about it. Found out that his brother had gone ahead of him and gotten the blessing that was for him, and taken the birthright, and was going to get away with it. And Esau became angry, and their mom found out about it and said, look, Jacob, your brother is about to kill you. Now that doesn't mean like what we would mean today. Your brother is going to kill you. Oh, he's going to punch me. Ha ha ha. No, he was going to kill him. And so, because of that, Jacob packed his things up probably not a lot, and ran away. Ran away. Jacob, the hill grabber and the deceiver. A very awful, deceitful, terrible person. That's who he was. Time passes by. Jacob's running around and hiding. He's gone on with his life. Esau is still hunting him down, wanting to find him, wanting to get back what was rightfully his. And through Jacob's life, he's had a few changes of heart and decides that he wants to come clean. He wants the forgiveness of his brother. He wants to be restored to him. And so he says, I'm not going to get away from this. He turns around and heads back toward his brother. But he doesn't do it like he should. He sends out gifts in front of him. Livestock, servants, and his family. And there he is, dragging up the rear. Thinking that, with all the men that Esau has with him so angry, maybe he'll take them out and kill them. And by the time he gets to me, he'll be calmed down a little bit and we can have a conversation. Everyone's gone on. Then we come to Genesis chapter 32. Genesis chapter 32, verses 24 and 25. Genesis 32, 24 and 25. If you will, read that aloud with me. And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled with a man with him until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And it goes on to tell us, and this fight went on all night. There's a lot of discussion about who it was that Jacob wrestled with. Some people think that it was an angel, but the most think that it was Christ. It was Jesus. Because it talks about, and the words that are used point to that it was more than just a man, that it was God in human form. And, as we know, God in human form is Jesus. So this is the first time that Jesus is showing up on the scene. And he's fighting with Jacob. And Jacob's wanting a blessing from him. He wants to be touched. He wants to be changed. And he won't let him go until he receives the blessing. And back and forth they go, off and on all night. And Jacob says, I want you to bless me. And the man says, no. What is your name? They keep going back and forth. I want your blessing. Bless me. What is your name? And to us that seems crazy. Someone wants you to do something for them and all you want to know is their name. It seems crazy that he would ask that question. Then at the same time it seems crazy that if you want the blessing so bad, why don't you just tell him your name? But for Jacob to actually say that my name is Jacob is to accept and admit who and what he really is. Names meant something to them. And so for him to say my name is Jacob, I'm a hill grabber, I'm a deceiver, I'm a terrible person. That's what it was meaning. That's what that's what Christ was wanting from him. You want to be blessed, then you have to tell me who you are. You have to confess your name to me. Finally, Jacob tells him, my name is Jacob. I'm a hill grabber, and I'm a deceiver. When it's all said and done, we can see a change in Jacob. We can see a change. He's given a brand new name. And instead of following behind his servants and his family and the livestock, he decides to go ahead, to catch up and to pass them and to meet his brother head on. And submit himself to whatever consequences were coming his way. Now for the rest of Jacob's life, he walked with a limp. See, when Christ touched his hip, he dislocated it. And so for the rest of Jacob's life, he walked with a limp, with a cane, having to hold himself up. Now, to a lot of people, that might not mean a lot. But to me, it means that Jacob had an encounter with God. He had a meeting and a discussion with God. And because he did, because he accepted who he was, he admitted who he was, he confessed to what he was, that encounter left a lasting imprint on his life. That encounter left him changed forever. Changed forever. He wouldn't ever walk the same again. Through the rest of the Bible, he never walked the same again. Until the day he died, he carried a cane or a staff, propping himself up, holding himself up, trying to keep going. Constantly reminded of that encounter with God, where he struggled and fought with him. You know, a lot of times we forget just how powerful an encounter with God can be. We go through the motions, we've been saved, we do everything that we feel like we're supposed to do. We go on with our lives. We have that emotional rush, that time where we just can't hold it in. Everything within us is bubbling and boiling and the emotions are pouring out. And we just can't stand it. We're running around telling everyone, guess what happened to me? Guess what changed in my life? Guess who I am now? I'm saved. I'm forgiven. I'm a child of the King. And 2 or 3 or 4 weeks later, or a month or 2 months or 3 months down the road, we're back to normal. If we find God for real, if we make ourselves accept who we are, admit who we are, and confess what we are, we will be touched by God. And if you are touched by God, there will be a lasting impact on your life. It doesn't matter who you were before. You could be a great person before you met God. But if you meet Him, if He touches you, your life will be changed. And it will be noticeable. It's not something that you can just pass by and weeks down the road you go back to who you were. Something changes. Something's different. You're a totally, completely new person. The old man has died and a new one is born. A life with God. An encounter with God makes a change. makes an impact. We see it all through the Bible. All through here there are stories. We look at the story of Saul. Riding down the road, God comes with a light and knocks him off. Shakes his world. He's gone around persecuting Christians his whole life. He's gone around killing them and beating them and doing it all thinking he's helping God. And that encounter with God, with the real God, not only did he get a new name, Paul, but he was left blinded for days. A lasting impact on his life. From that moment on, he was changed. He was different. He didn't go around doing the things that he did before. He wasn't this weak, sniveling person before. He was a very strong person. And even after meeting God, he was a very strong person. We read through it and we see that strong personality coming out. That doesn't change. But the things he did, the places he went, the things he talked about, the life that he had was different. It was changed. It was new. Because he had an encounter with the God of all grace. He had an encounter. And this morning, if we can look at our lives and the things that we are going through and the things that we're doing and the way that we are, and if we compare it to who we were before we met Christ, if we compare it to who we were before we came to an altar of prayer, and we don't see a difference, and we don't notice anything different, we still do the same things, say the same things, and we're still the same person. No matter if you did have a change back then, something has gone wrong now. If you have had an encounter with Christ, you will be different. Something will not be the same. And you can tell it. It's not something that's hidden, something you have to dig for or search for. It's right there in front of you. You are a different person. Something is new. Something has changed. You've had an encounter with the God of all grace. Day by day, week by week, month by month, we should be becoming a new person. We should constantly grow, constantly learn, constantly strive to be more like Him. If we've had an encounter with the God of all grace, today we should be better than we were last week. We should be stronger and closer to Him. This morning, if that's not true, if that's not the case, you need another encounter. You need to be touched again. We need to constantly, consistently, never-endingly strive and push to be more and more like God, more and more like Him, learning more about Him, and trying to be more like Him. We don't want to be the ones that hold the truth in unrighteousness. We want to be the ones that follow after Him, run after Him, push to be more like Him. That is a true Christian. And that is the life that He has called us to. Are you there? Are you growing? Are you better than you were yesterday? If not, it's time for another encounter.